That's the drill. I'm sleep deprived, but I feel better. Okay, let's see. We want this stuff. We want this stuff. We got somebody. Somebody's there and awake and ready to go.
No one's responded yet.
What? We started broadcast?
Yeah.
Okay. Someone type to Jared just so we know things are connected in the world. And I'm going to actually, Ian, would you go sharpen me
There we go.
a colored, these two colored, that one's short, this colored pencil, and then just grip me a different one from the drawer. Hey, hey, hey. I shaved. I still have rosacea, but I shaved. If anybody here is waiting for boy shirt, I think we're going to do it at the end of next week. I just have to absolutely check like one more calendar, and then we'll do it again probably in January, just in case somebody is like, I feel so gypped. And then I think tomorrow we'll have this ruffled skirt, the last step or two on it. And then, so maybe right before this class or right after it tomorrow, we'll do like 15 minutes for ruffled skirt people. But let's get to work on our bodices today. So here's the story so far. We've got our cotillion and stuff for our flatlining traced out. And I've got the fairy doll here in front of me. I'm going to work on just half of it right now. And in a moment, we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to start putting on our bone casing. And something I have discovered is that a lot of people buy this beautiful white bone casing, and for years they never realize that there's actually a channel, there's a hole inside the bone casing where the bone goes rather than the bone going behind it. And that by putting it in the channel, it's a little bit less of a bump on the outside of your bodice. So if this is you, just, don't tell anybody. But there is a hole in there. So I'm going to work on one half of the fairy doll. And what we're going to do is we're going to be going to the machine and putting on our bone casings. And then we're going to flat line our pink on, our kind of pink moire, old-timey looking stuff. Then we're going to mark some little bias bands or fold backs, and we're going to start putting some of the embellishment on it now. So it's going to get these little bands on the seams. And I like to put on any amount of that stuff I can before it's all sewn up, because I find often, if you make your whole bodice and then try to decorate it, you're fighting all kinds of things. So it's like I try to like decorate somewhat as I go. And one thing that I didn't show the new folks yesterday is I've got a piece of cotillion here, and this young and old is something that people need to be aware of, is that until this is sewn up now, we're going to be pretty careful with it. We're going to treat it gently, and we're not going to iron it like this. We're just going to press pieces up and down nicely. We might let pieces rest on the ironing board, and what we're going to resist is finishing sewing a piece and trying to stretch out the wrinkles. And I show this every time so that for the old crew, for the return customers, this is not new. But for the new folks, what I want to show you is I've got just a piece of cotillion here. And cotillion is really, really, really sturdy stuff. So imagine you're just like a flimsy little piece of bangling. What happens is, oh, did I lose my rotary cutter? When you cut across this, oh, thanks. When you cut across this, the first time you do that, wow, look how great I sewed, and pull it. All of a sudden, look, I just pulled on that one time and it's more than an inch crooked. So just treat stuff really delicate at this phase. So let's go to the sewing machine and put our bone casing on, and then I'm going to show you the method we use. I call it Moscow flatlining just because that's what I've heard it referred to from some folks that worked in old New York shops that aren't around anymore. I think because Russians did it. It's probably a terrible thing, but what we're going to be doing is pinning from the bust up onto our fashion, and then we scooch up the flat lining a tiny little bit so that we've got this bubble. Then we're going to even out the bubble so that on the outside of our bodice it's flatter. Rather than having waves on the outside, we're forcing a few waves on the inside, and that will keep the outside nice and flat. So let's go put our bone casing on at the sewing machine that I got fired up, and then we're going to flatline and put binding on these. Well, not binding, but like a decorative flat detail. And I had my little trimmy scissors. There they are. I need these. Okay. Okay, so when you put the bone casing on, you're good there. You're not too craned. When you put the bone casing on, right? So our center front one, it runs right down the center, and it's a straight line. But our middle front one, and remember, we're going to stitch across this somewhere so that it doesn't run all the way up, but we're going to run the bone casing all the way up because it's a nicer finish. But see, this one's a curve. So when you do a curve, you have to sew the long side of the curve first. So do you see how when I watch what happens to my piece of bone casing? When I bend it with a curve, one side stands up, and we have to ease that side down. If you sew the short side of the curve first, you have a hard time getting it to lie down, and it actually makes your cotillion scrunch in a little bit. So whenever you're sewing something flat as a curve, you always sew the longest edge of the curve first. So let's just do this one. And the other thing is, think about where to reverse. If you reverse, so this one is going in the shoulder, so we're not going to cut off the shoulder seam allowance. So I'm going to reverse at the top of the shoulder and then inside the garment. But let's look at our center front here. On our center front, it does no good to reverse up here in the seam allowance because that's going to get cut off. So we only need to reverse within the piece. And that's a general rule, is that you need to reverse inside the garment rather than in the seam allowance that's going to get cut off and graded. Now where it's our one middle front goes to the shoulder, we'll reverse because we're not going to cut off the shoulder, okay? So I'm going to do this just train style and feed one car right in behind the next. Let's see how long my stitch is here. Oh, that's a little long. So I want to reverse inside the piece. And I find too, when you pin on the bone casing, even though folks think that like, oh, they've pinned it so great, they've actually pinned it pretty darn crooked. And in the pinning of it, have torqued stuff. So if you can learn, so here I am going to reverse up there because that's not getting cut off. If you can learn to just lay things down and sew them, you're not handling the fabric as much. And see, I'm just guiding the fabric through. I'm not really pulling my fabric front or back. And I've been in settings too sometimes where folks are really yanking the fabric from the behind, and it's actually an issue that they're having with their sewing machine. The sewing machine is not feeding evenly, and they didn't know that it could feed evenly. So besides everything, you also kind of need to be familiar with how a sewing machine should be working. Whoop, I went off the line. Let me get back on there. There we go. And I find too, when I leave this all connected, I use less bone casing. Because if I trim it off every time, you end up leaving like, you know, an inch or something, and that adds up. Now we are at the end. And since it's all hooked together already, all I've got to do is twirl this around. And now we can do a couple by hand to get on there. Now we can go right down the other side. And after this, if we want, we can press it vertically a little bit, but we're not going to iron it. Iron means to drag the iron back and forth. Whoop, I didn't back up on that one. Got to get all the way inside the piece. So now here's my curve. See, you can see I've got this extra there on the short side of my curve. I'm going to just use my fingers to flatten and ease that out as it approaches the foot. An awl or a stiletto is really great too for that. Okay, we're going to cut them apart, give them a light press, and then start flatlining them. Ian, would you grab me another thing of pins and set it on my table, like a really full one? Thank you. Okay, so let me show you kind of how I press this stuff. Oh, I thought I grabbed a cloth for the iron, but I didn't. Are we out of cord? There. So you just don't want to drag the iron back and forth on it. If you want to press it at this point, just don't go back and forth. Just give it just a little bit of up and down. Don't try to get every wrinkle out of it right now, because you're going to cause problems. Whoop, I lost one. I'm coming. Oh, and then I undid my microphone. What's it? Oh, it's under the chair. Where's my clip? There it is. I'm back. I wish this thing wasn't so far away from.
No.
The microphone design needs some work. It's like set up for somebody who's like 9 feet tall. Oh, look, I just let that roast under the iron. Well, that's extra flat. And I know makers, when they give it the press after the bone casing, they just leave it for a while to cool off, because when it's warm, it's another opportunity to kind of twist stuff. But we're just going to pick them up and not yank on them and go to the table. Okay. Do I need to switch sides with you?
No, you're good.
Okay, so we've got those guys. Our center front is going to get the blouse fabric on it, but everything else is going to get this pink stuff, which has been washed and dried and folded up. I could give it another press, but I'm not gonna. And this is one of those things where, like, On one side, the image is shiny and the recess is matte. So it's gonna look the same, pretty much the same from both sides on stage. So I'm gonna just say that the facing the ceiling is the wrong side, but the next person down the line might not agree. And that's all right. And it's from Textile Warehouse, so the cut is super crooked. But it's better than Joann's. Oh my gosh, they cut stuff so crooked sometimes at Joann's. So what I want to do is I've got it squared up with my table. So even though this is trailing kind of off at a weird angle, I'm getting it kind of lined up with what I know is an angle to me on the table. So now let's do this scrunch on a few of these pieces. You don't have to do what I'm showing you, but it's pretty great. But it's also time consuming. So if you're making 100 things that are getting used once, don't do it. But let's start with the center back. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, so if you're not doing this scrunch and are just gonna flatline it, when you flatline, you always run off of the edges. You don't go turn a corner, right? If you just drive all the way around it like a football field or a track field, you'll get a bubble, no matter how great of a pinner you are. And the other thing that I'll show you now too is, right, when you pin like that, when you have a great big bite like that, it's gonna get sloppy and torqued. You need to only pin the little few fibers where you're actually sewing. Smaller bites like this will result in a much more precisely everything to everything. And then if you're a weave pinner, that like does even less good. Like it just like takes forever. And why? Because the only place where the sewing machine needle is entering is that itsy bitsy space right on our pencil line. So we want little bitty bites. So to do this scrunch, here's what we're going to start with. We're going to identify where we think the bust is. Go back just a tiny little bit. So here's our whole piece. So I'm kind of imagining where her nipple is if her nipple was in the back, and it's about right there. So the first thing I'm going to do is pin from that space up. So I've got it anchored there. We're going to let this top part just lay flat like it is. And you'll see my pin heads are going out into outer space because I'm going to cut extra pink out and then later on in the game edit it away with the serger. I'm planning to waste some fabric. Now, it's good that we've got our waist marked because the next step in this scrunch is, or we want to push this up 1/4 of an inch. So I've got my waistline marked. I'm going to go up 1/4 of an inch and put a mark right on the fashion fabric. So what I'm going to do next is push my waistline up until it meets that 1/4 of an inch. Now, if you've got like boucle, which isn't great for a bodice, but if you have a really loosely woven something, you might find that you're pushing up a 3/8 of an inch to get to stretch out like a drum. Or if you're working with a really, really tightly woven fabric, you might find that you just need to push up like an 1/8 or something. So experiment a little bit. But what we want is this bubble here, right? So we've got a bubble. So we divide the bubble in half and we're going to pin it down. Did it freeze? It froze. Are we having camera issues? So I'm going to divide the bubble in half and pin it.
I think that's just the Wi-Fi.
Here, but not the connected internet, right? That should be the better version. Okay. So now after I've divided the bubble in half, I'm going to re-divide the bubble in half. So when this is sewn, we don't, oh, that doesn't have a point. When it's sewn, we don't want like puckers and pleats in the cotillion. we want the fibers of it to just ease and lay down. And you'll find a point where you're like, wow, I've way overpinned this. So don't get quite to that point, but close. So now let's do it with our side back, because this is good to see a few times. And I've got my grain line drawn right on there. So I can even do the thing your grandma would tell you to do and lay your ruler over there and see how good you are with your grain line. Or if you're an eyeballer, just eyeball it. Same thing. I'm going to kind of imagine where the bust is, and I'm going to just anchor that part down first. Then I'm going to go to my waist and scrunch up, push it up 1/4 of an inch. Our bias one, we're going to do about 3/8 or 1/2 an inch because it's already stretchy. So there's my waist on the cotillion. I'm going to go up 1/4. And usually if I'm not teaching this, I don't draw the lines. I just push up and make a bubble and pin it down, because I've got a pretty good sense after doing this so many times of where the bubble should look like, what the bubble should look like. We're going to do 2 more pieces. Okay, so we got ripples on the white, but on the outside, if you right between where I pinned, I can already see that there's tension and it's nice and tight, which is what we want. See, when I hold it like this, you can see that this area is a little bit tight. That's what we're going for. So now let me do my middle front and then we'll do the bias piece. My middle front, I've got to look at the twill to get the grain line. Same thing, I'm going to pin from the bust up. Oh, dead pin. I'm going to find my waist and go up 1/4. And I'm going to push that straight up. The angled pieces, you'll kind of see take a smidge more finesse, but not bad. And you'll see too, I use the mat to actually make my pinning tiny, like a tailor stabbing into the side of their finger. You just want a little bit. I think this one we might do. Okay, now the bias one, he's already stretchy, but I'm not going to stretch on him. So let me get my grain line matched up. And actually, look here on the bias of the fabric, it's super, super, super stretchy. So we're going to scrunch this up about 1/2 of an inch instead of 1/4 of an inch. So I'm getting it laid on, matching my grain line. I'm going to do the same thing. And you don't need to know exactly where the bust is, just guess. Now, if you have pieces if you have a whole bodice with no bones in it, don't do this scrunchy thing. It kind of needs the bones to push it back out flat. But if you've got like a piece with a bone and then a piece with not a bone, you can still scrunch the not a bone piece a tiny little bit. I'm going to go just a hair more than 3/8 of an inch. So like almost a half. Then I'm pushing that up towards those marks. So we've got a much bigger bubble now. But this piece is on the bias, which means it's a little stretchy. So we have a little more room to, we have a little more ease to get it to lay down. So I'm going to pin the middle. And I'm going to pin the middle. See, look, I've already gotten rid of the top part of the bubble because of just the way the bias in the fabric works. Now I'm going to lay down my bottom bubble. Come on, fella. I want the middle of it. Let's do one more in between there. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to flatline 2 of these and put the decorative bands on 2 of them. So if you remember from the drawing, that she's got these kind of teal bands going up and down. And so instead of piping in these seams, we're going to make a decorative fold back, which is a real fun thing. And you don't have to do it like an even rectangular shapes like I'm going to do. You can do wide to narrow or narrow to wide or curved. So now we're going to cut outside of all these pieces and just leave that fashion on as long as we can, except I've got a crappy rotary cutter. Would you hand me the scissors from my drawer, the great big pair? The ones I hide. Yay. These are the best scissors on the planet. Kai Professional Series. So good. Okay. So we want this pink extra. Because having that extra fashion around there is also helping things from getting twisted and torqued. It's like a little support bridge around. It's like an airbag of fiber around your pattern piece for the time being. Okay, let me figure out which ones we're really going to flatline. We're going to do the middle front and the side front, and then we're going to put decorative bands on the middle front and side front. I'm also going to put a decorative band here on the side back, but I'm going to just show you 2 of them because we want to cover a few different things today. So I'm putting my side back and back away. I've still got my center front, which we're going to put some blousey looking stuff on. But let's go flatline our side front and middle front. And actually, you know what I could do, Jared, is cut out my strip for the little fold back thing now. So we're gonna take this teal stuff and cut it on the bias and use it to make a little band that goes in between the pieces like that, like a 3/8 of an inch band rather than piping. You can also like pipe and do a band, like there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm gonna just take my teal and fold it into a square, even though it's a rectangle. So I've got this great big long edge of bias now. And I'm going to just cut some strips out of this And actually, I should figure out how much strip I really need. So I'm going to put a 3/8 inch band alongside a few different pieces. Actually, this one's going to run up the neck and then down. So I need 3/8 for my band. Then I probably need like about another 1/4 or 3/8 for seam allowance on one side. So that's like 3/4 of an inch. And then I need a 1/2 inch of regular seam allowance. So that's like 1 1/4 inches. So I'm going to cut these pieces about 1.5 inches wide because I can always trim it away later. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of my fold with my dead rotary blade. I'm going to do 2 cuts. I'm going to get rid of my fold. Don't need it. Use it to tie up some fabric. And then I'm going to cut a piece that's about 1.5 inches, 1 5/8 inches. And when I folded that up, look how much I get right away without having to just keep cutting and cutting and cutting. And since I've already got this edge on the bias, you can come in, Julie. We are having a class. Yeah. Then you can pin this up so that I'm ready to cut out my next strips and I don't have to refold this whole thing because I know I'm going to use more bias than I've actually cut out. So I don't want my packet to get screwed up. So I'm going to just leave it folded up. Okay, let's go now to the sewing machine. You could probably just lower the camera and set it next to it for a little bit. Uh-oh, the puppy's waking up. The puppy's right here. Let's see. Was that the pencil I just dropped?
I don't know where.
Oh,
it's under the
it's
pedal.
under the pedal. Let's see if I shattered the lead the whole way. Oh, maybe not. Okay, so let me switch over to pink thread really quick. Does anybody have a question about what we're doing right now while I switch over to pink thread? I can move this light out a little bit. I'll be real fast. Quiet bunch. Ian, are you ready for something else? He can flatline those other 2 pieces there in pink. So when you flatline them, use a long stitch and run off the edges. So do a long edge, the next long edge, short edges, and skip over the bone casings on the bottom. You don't want to sew the bone casings closed. And then in a little bit, I can give you the other half of this one to trace out and put bone casings on. Okay, here we go. Let's make a bobbin. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I like to hold the thread because it makes the bobbin fuller on just about every machine known to man. Squeeze on an extra few yards. There, that'll get us going. The nice thing about this old Singer is it sits in an oil pan, so it oils itself the whole time you're using it. Very handy until you forget that there's an oil pan and you tip the machine back and out and dump oil all over everything, or move the table and forget that there's an oil pan. Okay, so when we flatline this stuff, we're going to use a long stitch and go all the way from edge to edge. And just like I did with the bone casing, I'm going to just kind of feed one piece in right after another. But I've only got 2 pieces now. Imagine I've got the whole bodice. Come on. It knows I'm trying to hurry. Okay, so I can make my stitch a little bit longer now because we're just kind of temporarily hooking stuff together. So I am going to go from one long edge that's the point where my front joins the middle front, so there's a little angle there. And see those bubbles we pushed in, the sewing machine is laying them down pretty well. And I'm stitching right on the line. Yeah, you can start to see that there's tension on the outside of the bodice. Eventually, when they sweat and dance, it's all going to kind of relax and balance out. But it's better to have the outside a smidge tight when you start than equal to the inside or looser than the inside. Go around the armhole here. Across the shoulder. I'm closing up the top. Now we're going to go across the bottom, but we're going to skip over the bone casing because we don't want to close it or we can't put the bone in. So I'm going to go right up to the bone casing and just lift it out of the way. Same thing on my side front. I don't want to close the bone casing. Whoop! I'm going to go right to it and skip over it. Top, I'm going to close. Can you hand me that blue pin magnet there? Okay, so I've got these flat lined, and the inside is a little wavy, but the outside is really flat and there's tension in it. So once we take the pins out, you'll start to see. This is one of those things too, to just try it on a piece at home and see. And absolutely, you don't have to do this scrunch, but for successful or flat lining, you're going to just pin a long edge and stitch the longest edge, then lightly press it, then pin the next longest edge and lightly press it, and then do your tops and bottoms. So now we're going to put these two decorative bands on here. Okay, so I want a band of green on the outside, on my side front, and on the longest edge of my middle front. So we're going to let the green go all the way up to her neck because she's a doll and that's cute. So what I'm going to do is get a little ruler, and on the inside, I'm going to draw exactly where I want the band. So I'm on the inside of my piece right now, and I'm going to draw in from the stitch line how much band I want to show. So I'm going to draw that right on the inside. And I think 3/8 will be just the right size. 1/4 is going to look a little thin, And a 1/2 inch is going to look a little bit wide. So we're going to mama bear this at 3/8 of an inch. Which is going to get me real close to my bone casing, but that's all right. It's doable. I can stitch through it, and I've got enough room for the bone. So let's mark the edge. So only mark the edges you want to do it to. And another thing, if you're putting these bands or using the fold back technique, and you have a bodice with tons and tons of pieces, take a minute and think about where are seams you think you're not going to alter, because figure out if you can put your band not on those seams so that if you have to adjust it, God forbid, you don't have to move this band, right? Okay, so what I've just drawn is my stitching line that I've just drawn a stitching line, that red line, that's going to be the width of my band. So on the outside of the piece, I'm going to take my bias, and we've got the flat lining line in already. So I'm going to lay my bias right side, just a little bit less, a little bit inside of my flat lining line, right? Because I've got a 3-inch wide space to work with here. So on the fashion side, I'm going to pin my bias down, but I'm going to sew it from the wrong side. And when you're placing the bones on your piece or in your pattern, whether you're doing this with a pattern you've developed or a new one, take a minute to kind of think about, like, are the bones in the way of my decoration, and which one should I move? And you could move either of them. So now we're going to get that pinned down. And if you're putting this on extreme curves, play with a little bit, because you might find that you need to ease a little bit one way or the other. And actually right here, this is going to be a spot I'm going to kind of preview, because there's kind of a change in direction here. I'm going to kind of see how well this goes, but I'm going to leave a little extra bias at the top in case I've got to unpick it and adjust it a little bit, because this middle front piece isn't just a nice smooth straight line. There's a little jog in it. Yes.
Is it what you're doing right now is similar to what we did to Jill's bodice when putting a fake panel on?
Yeah, this is just like Jared asked if this is what we did with Jill in our last in-person class, putting fake panels. This is essentially a fake panel. So you could have half of this be pink and half of this be green, but just use one piece of coutil and have less seams on the inside. Some people call it an illusion seam. I've known it as a decorative fold back, because we're folding something back to make a decoration. So let's sew this now and then give it a press. Okay, so now on the wrong side, I'm going to sew right on that line that I just drew. You could change this to teal if you want. I'm not gonna. The pink is so pale. Okay, so now this is my 3/8 in line. And you could use your presser foot too as your guide for this rather than drawing the line, as long as you're aware of what it is you're doing. So see, here I have just a little angle. We'll have to see how well it lies. And if it doesn't lie nice, we'll have to figure out what to do to make it do what we want. I'll just do the other one now. So what we've got now is this one side stitched on. And neither of my fabrics are very thick right now. But let's say that the pink was a really, really thick fabric. You might not flat line it on the stitch line. You might choose to first flat line your pink on your decoration line, then come in and chop out the original fabric so that all you've got folding over is your bias piece. So you think about that, but since I don't have thick fabrics, I can just piggyback them right on top of each other. So here, that will become the band of fabric, and that's gonna fit. Actually, let me do this one. We'll give it a little press, and then I'll show you the next stitch. So that's gonna lay over like that, and that actually fits into this piece right there. And then this next one is gonna lay over like that, which will be butted up against our fake blouse. So we're gonna have these two really cute green bands here. So let me press them really quick, and then I will come back and stitch it. Still in pink, I could change it to green. Ooh, let me give Ian more stuff to trace out and cotillion. So let's see which side we've done this side of all of it. So now this one's on the bias, so that follows your green. We need the wrong side of these four.
The wrong side of those four?
Yeah, so just retrace your notches and stuff all to the back.
Can I just use the clipper?
Yeah, you can use the notcher. Yeah. Okay, so let's press those. Here's where I screw it all up. I should just bring all of this closer.
I gotta hold so you can't yank out.
Yeah, okay. So all I'm doing now is pushing this band over. So all of this stuff gets surged off and goes away. So later on, we're gonna be left with just that really cute little robin's egg edge there. Now, if my bias wasn't laying down where I want it to, you have to think about, do you need to ease bias on as you're sewing, or are you maybe stretching the bias too much when you pin it? So know that each of those steps takes some intuition. It won't just happen. You got to put some thought behind it. Now we'll press this other one. And he's going to work. So here's where I was talking about there's kind of a change in direction. I think it's going to come out okay. It's very minor. And sometimes you'll want to put an itty bitty clip in the outside edge of the bias. That's okay. Just make sure where you're putting your clip, things aren't showing. So there's just my little, I'm trying to work out that itty bitty corner right there without yanking stuff around too much. It'll be a soft corner. So now what I'm going to do is pin this. I could pin it right here at the iron. And then we're going to re-sew on the original stitch line. So I just want to lightly pin this. So it's this great big wide thing right now, but when it's all done and when we have a couple pieces of this together, you will see that it's just a nice little decoration to make people go, "Aw." There's that little corner. If this corner was more extreme, or if I really wanted my little corner to be defined, I would do one piece of bias that runs up and then one piece of bias that runs up across my neck. But I'm not gonna, because we're gonna have such a great big bow right there that nobody will ever even see that there's a corner. Bum, bum, bum. So after I do this, I'll make sure everybody's clear on putting your bone casings on, on everybody's clear on this bias thing that we're doing. Then we're going to start cutting out some of the netting for the tutu, and we're going to dye some of it purple for the other one. This is the doll, and then we're going to work a little bit on the contemporary one. Okay, so I'm going to go to the sewing machine, and I go this way. Oh, and look, I left the iron right there. Hang on, we're going to burn this place down. Okay, so now I'm going to just re-stitch the original flatlining line. Again, like I said earlier, if you've got big, thick fabrics, you might want to grade them out. So you can pull those pins out, and then I'll pin a little bit of this together. So the next thing on these guys is going to be we'll serge together the long vertical edges of everything. We're not going to serge the top and bottom because they're going to get piped, so why waste our time with that? Don't serge anything that's just going to get removed. But let me pin together these two guys just so we can start to see what's going on. And I pin with the line so I can sew right up to the pin and pull it out. And I'm also doing itsy bitsy pin bites. The other, like a month ago in the Costume People group, I saw somebody commented on the benefits of an itsy bitsy bite, and I thought, see, it's not just me. I'm not making this stuff up. Couple more. Even when I'm pinning it, I don't really want to yank stuff around. If I feel like I have to ease a little bit, I can just kind of curve it over my finger, over my hand to make it ease. But if we flip that open, you can start to see our cute little bands starting to happen. So that's going to be the side front of a bodice piece. It's hard to see it. Yeah, you can see it here. It shows up. So these will get serged together, and then they will get seamed together. And same thing when you're seaming it, stop inside the piece. Don't backstitch all the way out at the edge. Okay, does anybody have questions about putting those bands on? Because that's kind of the decoration that this one is getting. I think we are going to move on to netting, to cutting some netting for the purple, more contemporary looking one. So let me take a sip of my sip here. Oh, you know what? There's Ian under that side of the table, that far table with the trash can. There's a green mat under the mat. See it? Will you bring me that? Oh no, I finished all my juice. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to use a green Olfa mat to help me cut out netting here. And we have got our list that we made yesterday for this white one. We're going 1 through 10, from 2 inches to 15.5 inches. Our topmost one is going to be 2L, and then the rest are going to be white diamond net. And I got a roll of nice crispy new white diamond net from Berenstein Textiles. Now there's been some confusion going on out there too. Sometimes we will mix a layer of crinoline into a regular tutu, and crinoline is a really super stiff net, but don't make a whole tutu in crinoline. It will be far too stiff. It was like the telephone game. Someone told someone that Travis said something, and then it got telephoned, and then by the time it got around, it was not at all right. A couple layers of crinoline mixed in a flat tutu are great, but a whole tutu made out of crinoline could take someone's head off. So sometimes you got to clear up rumors. Okay, so we have the ruffling machine, which is what we're going to use, but tomorrow I'll sit down at the machine and show you a couple different ways to gather and pleat netting. But what we find with our ruffling machine is that I cut everything with 5 widths of 54. So I cut the whole tutu in 54 widths, but 5 of them. 5, oh look, I wrote 5, 5, 5. That's not the devil. I cut 5 widths of 54-inch netting. And the reason why I cut 5 widths of 54 is we just cut them out and ruffled them, and then the lower layers on the panty, so like 1, 2, 3, 4, are putting on about 4 widths. So we have extra ruffle, and we just cut it off and throw it away. But then when we get from 5 and 6 up, the extra ruffle is actually needed in the panty, and we squish extra on at the sides. So we want more netting at the side of our panty as we work up the tutu, rather than evenly the whole way around. Because if you think of the tutu like a marching band going around a corner, right? For all the guys out here to be the same distance apart, like think of that as the volume of netting. At the sides, when we get to the sides, everybody has to start getting closer, and then we get even back out. So it's good to pack a little extra netting at the side and deal with it when you're steaming and tacking. I've read a lot of people say to pack more at the butt, which I think is a great way to make a girl have a nice, great big butt. So if that's the goal, that's what you should do. Okay, so I'm going to take my diamond net. Sometimes we get it on a roll and sometimes we get it flat. Rather than cutting it on the cross, 1, 2, 3, 4, 100, and seaming all of it together, we do what's called railroad cutting, where I'm going to just measure off 5 continuous. So I'm going to measure 54 inches 5 times and just whack off a big piece and then fold it up to cut my layers from. Some people don't like it. I've never not done it that way. And the diamond net is the same structure each way. That's like the point of the weave of the net, the diamond. It's the same on the cross and the straight. Some cheaper nettings are super spongy one way or the other, and that affects kind of how the tutu goes together and lays down. But really, I find I can railroad cut just about anything except crappy tulle, and control the shape with the steaming and the tacking. A lot of people like to start with a tutu that's completely flat and deflated, and then by the time the girl wears it, it's just a wussy dead thing. It's better to have a tutu with some air in it, so that as they rehearse with it, it will rest down into the shape you want. Okay, so I'm going to measure 5 54s, and I know where 36 is on my table. I'm going to just measure 36, 46, 56, 54. Where's my Sharpie? There. When we deal with it on the roll, I know like exactly on my body where 54 is. but I'm gonna just go 1, 2. This makes number 3. This makes number 4. This makes number 5. Now, if you've got a copy of the old London Royal Ballet book, Dressing the Dancer, you'll see that they, on layers like 1, 2, and 3, they do 3 widths, 3.5 widths, 4 widths, 4.5 widths. They add a half a width the whole way up the tutu, which I think partially they did that because when they made them out of bobbin net or out of cotton netting and had to starch it, that stuff weighed a frickin' ton. So they were working at not putting as much weight in the tutu by not having the lower layers as long. But anymore, I think it's acceptable to do like 4 widths at the bottom, 5 widths at the top, and maybe your topmost one 6 widths, if that's what you want. So I've unfolded this, and I'm just gonna keep folding the length of it in half until I have one packet that I can cut a bunch of my layers from. So I've got the long edges, and if you don't have great big long arms, put a pin every like yard or so, and that will help you fold it up. I worked on a few shows at Houston, and as soon as netting, I worked on tons of shows in Houston, but tutu ballets, when netting would come in, we would just get it all folded up and prepped. So then it was time to make a tutu. You would just go to the rack and get 4 width, 5 width, or 6 width pieces, and you just start making your tutu from that. And usually I go way out in the middle of the room and do this, so I've got tons of place to shake and straighten it out. Then when you've got the pins in, you can just move the pins forward. And then the tool that I've got that we're going to put some color on just like the second to the top layers. So our one layer of diamond net, the longest diamond net layer, or the widest diamond net layer, we're going to put purple on. And then the tool that's going to be our very top, underneath all that applique, we're going to put some purple on. So we're imagining that appliqued fabric we've got is really what's making our whole costume look, dense and purple at the waist, but we're going to cheat and we're going to put some color in the netting to just kind of help the illusion. So look, pretty quickly this gets manageable. I've seen shorties do this too. It's doable. And having that pin to move to the front definitely helps keep it all in line. I'm going to give it a shake. And if you're annoyed with the folds from the cardboard bolt, you can give it a steam too. So now I've got this great big packet, and I'm going to put a couple pins in it to keep it from getting too out of control. And I like to look at the bottom to see if I've got things folded up in there in weird ways. And another thing, if you just take a great big piece of tulle or net and unroll it from the roll and like measure every 5 or 6 feet, you'll see that it goes like this, that it's so uneven from edge to edge. So we don't even worry about that. We just start with whacking off some of the edge. So I'm going to just kind of look for my shortest part in there. And I'm going to start by cutting off about 1.5 inches and 1 inch and something, and get rid of that Yankee edge. Now I should get some paper. And will you hand me a piece of out of the printer, just a piece of printer paper? So I want to make sure I keep track of what's what as I'm cutting this out. So I'm going to just title them by their layer. So I'm going to do 1, which is 2 inches, and 2, which is 4 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going 2, 4, 6, 8. 2 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches, 8 inches. So even though that folding took a little bit of time, now we don't have to cut this 5 times and seam them all together. I also am going to jump on a soapbox and say that if you cut on the cross, which is absolutely great and works very, very well, you need to seam stuff together, because I have sat at a lot of YGP competitions where it wasn't seamed together. And it's just as soon as the girls start dancing, all I can do is watch all those separate pieces of netting putting on their own show. Looked great in the fitting when she didn't move, but she's been rehearsing all week. She probably wore it on the bus or something. And now what you've got's a train wreck. So if you had your packets all measured hanging on a rack, think how quick you can just bang out a tutu. And I put a pin in these because I don't want it to explode until I'm ready to ruffle. So we're going 2, 4, 6, 8. Then actually I'm going to make sure that I cut out the one that we're going to dye, which is going to be 15 inches. So you guys don't have to watch me cut out all the net, but we're going to see how much we get out of this one piece. And this is 72-inch wide diamond net. 15 inches is right where my pin is. Then as you're working along your packet, if you start to feel that like, oh, I think the edge has gotten a little bit off, and actually I feel the edge has gotten a little bit off, just straighten up a little bit. And this foldy-uppying is great too if you're going to put scallops or dags in your tutu. Scallops are the round bumps, dags are points. And you got to watch it with dags, because some material, the dags just curl back on themselves and they never lay like you want. And really, I think the only reason to put dags in something is if you're making Swan Lake or a bluebird. They don't show as much as the effort that goes into making them takes. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. My number 5 is 9.5. And then my next one is 11. I got to look at some old tutus that were at the William Ivy Long studio in New York that were scalloped. And we kind of came to the conclusion that this specific set of tutus were scalloped because each layer was a slightly different color. And we thought that the scallops were blending the colors together at the edges rather than being something that showed as a scallop. So I thought that was kind of fun. It's like the reasoning isn't always the same from project to project. I should have gave it a little steam where all the folds were on the bolt. I'm getting just a little crooked. So now we need 11 inches. And you know what? Even if your edges are off and there's a little dip or something in it, it's just a giant bath sponge. And nobody is going to know. Five and six are going to get a hoop casing in it, and we can look at that tomorrow probably. That's why there's a follow-up day, and then I'll just like have, oh, and we're going to do another follow-up day, and then a follow-up day to the follow-up day. The more I babble, the more your money is worth, the more your time. Something like that. You guys know what I mean. You're lucky the more I go on. I always dribble out things that somebody will email and go, oh, I didn't know that. So that was 12.5 inches. So that's my 7. So all I need is my 8. So we have got a bucket of fabric, netting that's already folded up. Tomorrow I will just go to that bucket and shop and see if I've got something that'll work for my 8. But I'm smart. Oh, it's fine. I don't need it, no. I'm going to cut out tool, but thank you. So I'm going to just put a little note here that I need 8. It's like, I don't have my 8 now. Now, let's cut out some tulle. So, besides like netting sometimes changes. It's like you'll order netting from somewhere, and then in a week you'll order netting and you'll swear it's completely different. It probably is, because a lot of it, even some of the stuff that people are like, it's English, it's Italian, it's Chinese usually, and it's just packaged for different companies. So even though you might come across different companies, some of it truly is different and better and worse. But a lot of stuff that's available in the States that has different names, it's mostly coming from China. So the tool that I'm going to use, I am going to cut on the cross, because the tool I've got is kind of spongy one direction. It's excuse me, it's a little spongy on the cross, and if I railroad cutted it, I am going to have layers that grow, and eventually my top of my tutu is going to kind of go, even though we tack it, it's going to grow a little bit. So I'm going to cut my tool on the cross, and this stuff is 108 inches wide. It's folded up on there a bunch of times. So let's just see how many 54s that is, because I want way more than 5 54s for my tool. I want the tool to just be like exploding with fullness. So 108, I could have done that in my head. 108 inches is 2 54s. So I want like 6 or 7 54s or 8 54s. So I'm gonna cut 8. So I want 8 54s, right? But it's like this is 2 54s. So I'm gonna cut 4. I am gonna cut 4 times 15.5 inches on the cross, so that this tool layer is just absolutely full. I don't like it when you put tool on the top and it's just kind of gathered a little bit. I like it to be like, and also the tool has a tendency to kind of, be thin and disappear. So if you want to like see that it's there, cut more than you think you need. And this, it surpasses my mat. So I'm going to just cut my bottom. Kind of straight-ish. And then I'm going to go up to 15.5. Put something on there to hold it down. And we're gonna do 4 of these because we're gonna dye. We're gonna just whap some color on the edge that's gonna get gathered. So when we do all this applique business, the tool and net underneath is gonna help us kind of create this illusion. So I'm gonna just fold each of these 4 in half because we're gonna dye some purple. Well, I'm not even gonna really try to ombre it. If anybody did our quick dip webinar, actually we're finishing that tutu next week from that, so I'll send everybody a picture of that. I'm not trying to do like fancy pie wedges or anything. I just want there to be some purple underneath the applique stuff. Boy, it is dry in here and this stuff is staticky. I can feel it crackling as I cut it. There's 2 out of 4. I'm going to just pin number 1 right on top of him. The tool, sometimes you want to steam it a little bit ahead of time, but then it's kind of like a toss-up because the more you steam and abuse the tool, the more it loses its sizing and the
Hello? Yep.
Okay. You didn't miss anything. We just lost we had to put a new mic battery in, but I just stopped talking. So whoever gets just the recording and didn't watch this will never see the note. And before they wait 2 minutes, they will message me in 5 locations saying the audio stopped. So I'm just cutting out the 4th one of these, and then we're going to go stick some purple on them. Then I think we'll start with a little bit of the top plate for this more modern looking one, the one that's going to the girl at ABT. So I've just been pinning my tool ones together. To make it easier to dye them. So we're going to put some purple on that. We're going to put some purple on this. And actually, I wonder, do I need to just drag that table over closer? I could do that really quick.
Which I can do.
Do you want to?
Yeah.
We're going to bring the table with the dye on it just a little bit closer. You could probably just unplug it because it's hot enough. Just careful because it's got really hot water in it. That's good. Then we'll just move it out of the way again. That puppy keeps yawning. Okay, so what we're gonna do, this is total credit to Patty Charbonneau, the turkey roaster method. It's great. I use the insert to dye, and then if I want to cook in there, I take the insert out and rinse it out good. But I've got some dirty, gross towels here. And all we're going to do, actually, I could show you the semi-ombre approach to this too, by using a triangle when you dye it. So all I grabbed is just some cheapy purple Rit dye because I just want some purple. I'm not even like worried about what kind of purple and is it warm or is it cool. I just want some purple. So I'm going to dump a blub of purple. And I've got my water at like 350 degrees. We don't want it roasting. Oh, I just splashed a little bit of purple on the white brocade there, or the white silk. We'll put an applique on it. And you do want it hot. So I've got my number 9, which is the net, the last net, and then there's going to be tulle on top of that, and then all kinds of lacy bits. And the edge that goes to the hip is where I want color. So what I'm going to do is just fold this great big old packet in half. And if I want to make it appear ombre a little bit, I'm going to dye a triangular shape, because when it's ruffled, you have more amount of color at the bottom and less amount of color at the edges. Yay, those are all flatlined, or no, they're all boned. Let's see, I'm trying to think if I've got anything else for you tonight. I don't think I do. I'd say call it a night.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll check in with you on Monday.
Sounds good. Bye. Right, what time is it? Yeah, it's 4:30-ish, so that's good. So if you do a triangle, it will have kind of the appearance that it's ombre. Oh, and actually I'm going to dye this, not the edge that's where the fold is a little bit, because that'll be, harder to ruffle. So I'm going to just stick it in. I'll lift it out in a minute so you can see what I'm doing. And it's not rocket science. We're just putting some color on some net, because once it's all gathered, you're not going to see the little discrepancies or weird edges that will ruin it when you try to fix them. So I find the more you mess with this to try to make yourself happier, the more unhappy you will be. So now I'm going to just lay that down on the ground, and with another towel across it, just step on it a little bit. Very technical stuff. Makes me want to go to the bathroom. Now we'll do the same thing with the tulle. And this is just so we've got something helping the color underneath our lace. We're not really going for an elaborately dyed costume. We're just putting some color under the appliques, because we want it to look like the appliques are just completely dense at her hip. And by doing a little bit of a triangle, when it's opened up and then regathered, it will give the illusion that it's slightly ombre. So if you wanted, you could darken the dye, you could add more. We could have started with pink and then lilac and then purple. But this one isn't so much about the dye as it is about this great fabric we're going to applique. So we want to just step on that a little bit. I'll kind of open one of these up and then you can see a little bit. So that's just a triangle, but then when you have a triangle next to a triangle like that, and this is like 100, this is like 400 and some odd inches. When you start to ruffle that up, it starts to give the illusion that it's paler at the edge and darker at the waist, because we have more white out here and some white going to the waist, the hip, and then it's densest at the hip. So this will, underneath this stuff, kind of help our idea that we want it to be really, really dark at the hip and then get lighter as it works its way out. So that's what we're using this dyed bit for. And if you put safety pins in here, you can actually throw it in your dryer for a couple minutes, which is good to help set the color. But I find as long as your dye is hot, the heat in your dye pot is usually enough to get your color set onto netting. But know that dye is weird. You might have real minerally water, or you might have real salty water, or you might have who knows what that can cause problems. So it's like I use dye as like a helper, but I never am like 100% relying on just the dye. So we're going to put those out of the way for a little bit. And let's start making just start laying out some of our purple top plate here. What I need, Jared, is just a chunk of brown paper. So we're making a donut, right? Like we're making a shape with a high hip that we're going to start appliquing stuff onto, but we're going to applicate lots of stuff onto it, like no space left unapplicated. But I'm going to show you another little trick. We're going to make a donut that's purple, and then when it moves out into the white part, we're going to get rid of some of the purple and replace it with white diamond knit. Thank you. Boy, it feels like Friday, doesn't it? We had the work Christmas party today with our building, and actually more people came than I thought would. So I've actually dropped and stepped on this ruler today, so it's the paper is what's holding it together. And let me see what our girl's high hip is. Her high hip is 30. So I'm actually going to make my high hip on this 31, because I find lots of times sewing over and over something, you kind of shrink it up a little bit. So I'm going to anticipate that this is going to end up a little bit smaller. Taylor, you've just got to hold it together a half an hour more, and then we'll go outside. She had company today, so she's pretty tired. Okay, let me get my white net out of the way. Okay, so what I say 31 inches. So first I'm just folding my paper in half. And this top plate isn't reaching all the way out to the edge of the tutu. It's just like stuff at the hip, and then it's going to trinkle away until there's nothing going on at all and we see white. But I'm going to find 31 on my ruler, which is right there. And I'm going to trace. These are back ordered right now, so you're very welcome to order one, but it's probably not coming by Christmas. We love the rulers, but I would be lying if I didn't say they are a headache to get made and boxed up and shipped. But I want everybody to have one. I just want you to know it's not going to come super duper fast. So our tutu is 15 inches when it's all done. So I'm going to just make a purple donut that's maybe 9 inches. We can let her out if we want. Taylor, be quiet. She could just run around. The puppy's losing her cool. So I'm going to make this actually, you know what? More like 7 inches of purple. So I'm going to just go around here. Right? So I'm not measuring from, kind of the center of the oval. I'm measuring from the outside edge of the oval. So if we do about 7 inches here, and we've got appliques out here that we still want to hook down, we can relay, so this is going to be a purple donut, we can relay this onto white and then applique the white underneath them. So we'll have some appliques that are just kind of dangling off the edge for a little while until we get them all hooked down. And I should mark my front because the front of this is different than the back. Oh, she's still hoping she can get some food left over from the potluck. Come here, puppy. She knows there were meatballs up on that table, and it's killing her that we're not just like spoon feeding her meatballs. Hopefully she doesn't have an accident. If she does, we will get it when we're done. So I just like to kind of know where the side seam is on these things. Okay. What I'm going to do now is trace this onto a piece of purple diamond knit. And sometimes we'll double this stuff. Maybe I'll double it. Does it fit doubled? What color's in my machine? Pink? I'm gonna double this. Oh, I hit the table. We're back. Sound is coming and going because I keep hitting the table with it. Instead of drawing a line around here and sewing it, another thing you can do is just pin your pattern right to it and then go to the sewing machine and sew just right at the edge of your pattern. Taylor! Should I go get her? She's stressed. Just put everything away over there. Sorry, the puppy is being demanding, you guys. She doesn't know why she's not allowed to eat the potluck stuff. So actually, I can do some more stuff on the table because Jared is putting that away. So all I'm going to do here is pin this on, go to the sewing machine, and stitch my layers together right on the outside of the paper. And actually, I do that a lot of times when I'm making a net donut because the paper kind of helps keep the net from stretching or sliding. And then you just edit away whatever's on the outside of the stitch that you don't want. So like I'll also stitch around this inside piece here too. But we'll start cutting out some of our appliques. Is there lots of stuff left to put away? You could probably pitch the sandwiches unless you want them. You'll eat them tomorrow? Okay. Sometimes too, if I'm making like organza flower petals and bagging them with net or something, I'll just either spray tack with that Dritz basting spray or I'll pin the paper pattern right to it and just stitch just on the outside of the paper, and it keeps all the shifty stuff from shifting too much. So we're gonna stitch around this, stitch around the inside and the outside, and this is going to be what we're going to eventually start mounting some of our applique stuff on. But let's look at what we've actually got going on here with this fabric. It's time to commit and make a plan. And we want the outside of the tutu to be all white. So we want a good 4 or 5 inches of white tutu way out at the very edge. But let's just kind of lay down where, of course, start. I want to just kind of start looking and seeing where I think I can cut stuff up. Because this is also, even though it's kind of artsy across the fabric, if you look at it one way, it's actually pretty linear. There's actually like a lot of line going across it. So I'm going to first kind of just stare at my motifs and see what's something I can easily just get like a base layer down on. And I don't want to have to cut apart tons of stuff, but I know I'm going to have to cut some stuff apart. And sometimes you'll have a lace like this where it's real obvious that you could put darts in some spots. You could dart around it to start making your motif dense out to nothing. But the problem with this one is it's riddled with rhinestones. So I'm going to just cut out a few big pieces first and kind of see how they relate to my donut here. And as I was laying it down, I was seeing that there's kind of this big triangle thing that goes on. And it seemed like that would be a good thing to start with and then fill in. So actually, I think I'm going to take these triangles. Like it's not right, it's not a triangle, but I kind of see like a triangle of 3 big chunks. I'm going to cut out a few of those and start laying them in a circle just to see what we've got. So let's cut into this expensive stuff. Oh, I lost my donut. So it's like that flower is the edge of each triangle. So let me just cut out. Then, right, this stuff's going to get reapplicated, which just means we're going to zigzag over the edge. You can also go nuts fray checking at this point. You can also just paint the back with watered down Elmer's glue. But this embroidery has got, the embroidered pieces have a border embroidered next to them, so they're not going to unravel very far if I'm cutting in between their little borders. They've got like a chain stitch border. Do you see the little purple thing that I just dropped off the table? Can you hand me that? It's right there. It's like right on that side. So let me cut out a couple of these things. Just set it right there. So I'm going to cut out like 3 or 4 of those. I know some folks will take something like this and let it haunt them for days until they finally cut into it. And I just say, cut into it. And then if you screw up, just stick another piece of lace over it. The left side of it's much easier to free up than the right. Let's see, how many of those are we going to get? We're just going to use them all. It looks like florally and then like some weird ocean thing too. It's kind of fun. Oh, that dog. There's no food over there. Come here. Come here. Come here. Calm down. Tell everybody you're being a baby. She's being a baby, you guys. Ugh. She got her Christmas bow on too. Look at that. Calm down. There's no food on that table. You're going to make it. Just hold it together for a little bit, okay? Okay. I'm surprised she took a nap and remembered that that's where we were eating lunch. She's smart. She's a smart cookie. On the right side of this, I'm like kind of getting through the same spot, but when in the end, we want this to not look like a whole bunch of like plunked appliques around a clock. So we're gonna do things to interrupt it so that it doesn't seem so regular. But if we can cover a few chunks of space like this, we're gonna. So we'll go stitch around this here in a minute, but let's just kind of preview the very beginnings of what we've got. One, two, three, four. We've got 5. So I think I would not put one big one right in the center. So here's my front actually. I would start with kind of a split front. Then we can add some stuff in here, because if we just go right like that, our eye will just want to try to make the whole thing symmetrical, and it's not going to be, and we don't really want it to be. So if we've got kind of 2 in the front, we can jam these side back ones a little more towards the front. And then we can put 1 in the center back, which later we'll have to jam a placket through, but that's okay. So we're a little bit predictable right now, but when we start adding in some of these guys, and when we start cutting up some more of those guys, we're going to be better off. And I do know that I want white at the outside of this. So this great big one is pretty close. Here's my 15 inches. So I'm already thinking that maybe I want to get rid of this great big one there. Or what if I turn it so we have less? Ooh, there, that's better already. Look at that. It's like it shouldn't go on the way you think it should the first time. There, I'm going to say that when we start messing with these, we're actually going to do it so that the big flower isn't really where it was laying on the fabric. You know, we're gonna twist it. And then here at the sides, where my big flowers are gonna overlap, I'm gonna just chop off. I don't need 2 big flowers right there. So then I'll start editing away what doesn't need to be there. Then I can start piecing in little bits in between things and densing it up, like in the spots by the waist. I think we're going to actually take some extra motifs like this guy and sandwich them on top of each other, because I do want it to be a bit crammed right at the hip. So we can start taking things like that and using them to fill in right at the hip. And we can even cut some of these apart to just kind of start breaking up the outside edge a little bit. And we might even take just a few single flowers, and they can go closer out towards the white edge. So what I'm going to do right now, because everybody has their handy pocket assistant, I am going to take a picture of this, since I like how it looks, so that I can lay it out like that again tomorrow. And why don't we just send it to this girl's mom right now? She will be very excited. Okay, so let's stitch our donut. Actually, let's cut up one or two of these guys and lay them on there too for fun. So we can start imagining how it's going to all go together. And I love appliques where the thread making the beads stay on does not run to the next applique. They're not going to come apart as much. Oh yeah, some chunks of this stuck in here are going to be just what the tutu doctor ordered. Yeah, so we don't want like, right? We don't want it to be like super crusty, but we want it to be crusty. We want the right amount of crust. So some of these now, if I'm cutting close to the beads, what I'll probably do is take great big pliers and smash the glass beads closest to the cut and then leave their thread in there and put a little fray check so that they don't unravel. Yes, that's going to be just like great, you know, photographed in the Mary Claire magazine or wherever this girl ends up wearing this tutu. She's had some great photo shoots too, and I just wish we'd have just made her a tutu and sent it. Okay, so let's stitch around our donut on the sewing machine, and then I think that's probably where we'll stop today. Tomorrow we'll have a look at the bodices again and see kind of where we're at, and we'll work on the panty and the sleeve for the fairy doll. So we'll make a panty for this girl, for the white and purple girl. We'll make the sleeve, a sleeve for the fairy doll, and then I'll show a couple different ways to deal with gathering and ruffling net if you do not have a ruffling foot or a Johnson ruffler or something like that. And then on the follow-up day, we'll have a few steps done that we'll show again, and then we'll probably add one more like hour long after that. Oh, can I still get in here? I can. Watch out, dog. You might get turned purple.
She has eaten the cord.
Oh, she ate the cord. She's a cord eater. Well, you're lucky that wasn't plugged in, dog. She ate right through it. Uh-oh. This is her new obsession. Hang on, we got to scold the puppy a little bit. Just grab her here and I'll put her in her box. I can't believe you ate through that cord. Well, at least that's a cord I can fix. That's her protest because she didn't get any Swedish meatballs at lunchtime. Okay, let me see if I can get... Should have left it plugged in. She wouldn't eat any more cords. Ever. She wouldn't eat anything ever again. It would be the end of her time. So this is a handy way too, like I was saying, to make petals or bag things. Like if you've got like an organza flower petal or something. No, she's mad at us. Maybe she can get over it. Okay, so you have to turn on the sewing machine. And if it's just scrunching the netting up, you might just need to loosen your tension a little bit. And sometimes it's your bobbin tension. But I find this is easier than trying to draw a line. Well, drawing a line is easy. My problem is trying to see the line. I am blind with some of this stuff on netting. Boy, that's a long way around. So, right, the reason why I'm doing part of this, the top plate, you know, the base for the top plate in purple is because we're trying to keep that purple look at the waist. Now I'm going to just slide to the inside. And I'm going to use the thread to kind of mark different areas too. So there's my center back. I'm going to just run a tack out at my center back. Who, what? Oh, good, Hermione. Here, send her a picture of me sewing. Then I'm going to take my side and make a thread tack. So I'm just moving the netting back and forth so I can make a thread mark. Then, because I want the front to be more identifiable than the back, I might just stitch like a 2-inch line right at the front so I know that's my center front. We're at the other side. Taylor, don't be so crabby. I stopped bringing you to work and bring those other 2 dogs again. Right? 3 dogs is a lot. I think the other 2 enjoy being at home without her. Okay, so now, oh hush. So now we can pull all those pins out. And then I'm gonna cut the inside hole, but I'm gonna leave like an inch seam allowance so I've got something to work with. Actually, I'm not gonna cut the inside hole until a lot of the appliquing is done, because having that netting in there helps kind of keep it all from getting too torqued or twisted or wonky or janky or crooked. But I will trim along my outside line now because I don't want all this purple netting hanging out over the white tutu. Okay, back to the table for 2 minutes and then we're done for today. That could use a little bit of steam. So now I'm just trimming this outside edge. And the inside I'm going to leave for later on. We'll give this a little press and then I'll start pinning on all the stuff to it. And depending on how much hangs out past the edge, it might just get hand tacked onto the tutu, or we might stick some pieces of white diamond net behind it and applique them to that, so that we don't want all the edges flopping in the wind. We want them. We don't want them hammered down completely flat so that the tutu bowls weird, but we don't want them too floppy. There, so then I'll give that a press, and we've got a nice line for our front. We know where our backs and sides are, and this is a great place then that we can start the process of sticking all of this on. And see, some of these guys are probably going to even go into the waist, so I'll start figuring out where can I cut those guys off. And I find too, rather than just like cutting this off, so see my waistline is going right there, rather than just cutting that off, I think it's better to take out a section of applique that you can still use and either shift it down or move it somewhere else, because a piece of this stuff, a piece of our other one could go in to take up the space. So I try not to like cut straight across a flower. I'd rather take out a flower and figure out somewhere else for it to go instead of just like truncating a flower. So that's where we're going to end up for today. And when I'm putting this on, we'll use the free motion foot and probably some Dritz basting spray. And we'll just work around the outside edges and then go through to some of the inside edges. Then with our rhinestone machine, we can glue the motif also to the diamond net just with the glue on the rhinestones. Gotta have a rhinestone machine. Thank you, everybody. We will see you tomorrow at the same time. And then I don't know if I sent the link out for the follow-up day, but we'll be doing this again Monday. And then if we've got to do an hour on Tuesday, we'll do an hour on Tuesday. Thanks. Bye-bye. Why you